Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Coming Home, Survive and Thrive in Homeschooling. We have been working our way through the series, How the System is Failing Our Children. We're getting towards the end of that. This episode contains information for families who have opted to leave the school system entirely. That is, they do not want to move from a public school to a faith-based school or a private school, but instead wish to pursue the option of homeschooling. Now, in the beginning, when I was laying out all of the subject matter that I felt could be included in this series, when it comes to the option of homeschooling, there are a few different ways that families can go about this. One of the options I dealt with was being able to purchase an entire curriculum that suits your worldview and covers everything that a child and their family need to implement the very best education they can offer their child. Not everyone wants to put together their own curriculum. As you know from previous episodes, we pursued the Charlotte Mason approach, which is different from being able to buy an entire curriculum. Today we're hearing from Peter Thomas, who is with Homeschooling New Zealand. And Homeschooling New Zealand exists to equip and supply homeschooling families in a range of curriculum, conservative, Christian. You can buy it either in their entirety or you can supplement what you're already doing. They offer assessment for your children, no matter which age they are. And once your child is moving through into the high school age in New Zealand, they also offer an alternative pathway to finishing formal secondary school education with a pathway into university or something equivalent. That I found was an interesting aspect that I didn't know. Before I hand over to Peter and at the interview we did together, I'd like to remind you I am available for consultations, coaching, even homeschool counselling if you really feel you just need to talk things through with somebody who understands from more than 20 years experience of the things that are bothering you, the things you need answers to your questions or your doubts. If you feel that this is something I can help you with, you can find me via my website, cominghomeinfo.com. All right then, let's hand over to Peter. Welcome, Peter. Thank you so much for joining me. Can you please start by introducing yourself? Tell us who you are.
Okay, well, hi Christine. My name is Peter Thomas. I'm the Associate Principal at Homeschooling New Zealand. I've been with Homeschooling New Zealand now for about 5 years, and prior to that I was a teaching principal in a small Christian school in the town where I live.
Can you please tell us, what does Homeschooling New Zealand do?
We're a support agency for homeschooling families. We look after around about 800 families across the nation, probably around about 1,500 to 1,600 children of all ages. Our organisation comes under a charitable trust. We're an overtly Christian organisation. We're helping families who want to homeschool their children using curriculum that is either from a Christian perspective or compatible with Christian faith.
So when it comes to the curricula that you supply your families, let's just get into the nitty-gritty. What do you have available to your families?
We help families by designing individualized programs for each child, and then we make recommendations of particular curricular products that they can use for those programs. To do that, we start by getting the children to do diagnostic testing so that we can figure out where they're at and if there are learning gaps, and then we can place them on particular curricula at a level that's going to be enable them to be successful and to advance from there. Now, we were set up nearly 40 years ago as an agency supporting families using the ACE curriculum. ACE stands for Accelerated Christian Education. It's American-based, it's self-paced learning, working out of workbooks, and supporting families using that particular curriculum. And right up to this date, a lot of our families are still using that curriculum. But we made a decision back about 2017 that we really wanted more flexibility and more opportunity for the families that were with us to use from a wide range of resources and not be limited to the ACE curriculum. As much as we are happy with much of it or most of it, there are just so many good products out there that we wanted our families to have access to. So we designed our own qualification framework for secondary school students, and we took that to the universities as a proposal. Would they recognise our qualification using a range of curriculum products, not just ACE? And we're really grateful they approved that. And so we have these qualification pathways now for secondary school students that can either take them into university or an alternative qualification for whatever else they might need to do as their next step. Yeah, so now, aside from using ACE curricula for students' programs, parents might be using products like Saxon Mathematics or MathUC or ABECA. At primary level, there's a relatively new curriculum out there called The Good and the Beautiful. We don't use it at secondary level, but we're happy with it for primary level programs. It's a nice product. So when we are designing programs for students, we discussing with families the merits of the various options that are on the table at each level and each subject, and we'll consider those sort of products. But we're not just limited to those, because there are one-off courses at certain levels and certain subject areas that we like, and so it would be a big list to start listing all of those. So what we've done is we've looked around the world really for courses that suit our type of program, and that's probably worth for listeners to understand. What we've chosen is products that parents can deliver without them having to be an expert or feel like they have to teach the subject themselves. They're pre-packaged, a bit like a Betty Crocker cake mix, where you take out the packet and you add water and mix it up and stick it in your oven and out comes a cake. These kind of curriculum programs are self-packaged, self-teaching, self-directed learning programs that a parent can confidently give their child and support them as they work through the materials, but they're learning from the material rather than from their parent. And the parent's obviously there to provide help and guidance and to oversee the program. But the other thing about these programs, these different products, is that they all have assessment mechanisms. Usually that comes in the form of a test at the end of each unit, and that's how you can measure progress. And so by using those pre-packaged products, we can then measure students' progress right through to the issuing of qualifications.
Those one-off courses, that's interesting. Would one of their purposes, if I've understood you right, Peter, is that if a student might be struggling in a certain subject or a chapter in a subject and the parent can't meet that need, it's almost like having a tutor, a digital tutor. Would that be right?
When students are struggling with a particular concept, the internet is a great tool. You can look things up and find people who can help you with that particular thing. Sometimes families, of course, are going to find somebody local or somebody in their family or a friend they know who can help them. Let's say it was a mathematics subject and the parent didn't feel confident to do it. So you might look up Khan Academy online, or we don't really have digital tutor programs ourselves. What we try to do is point families in the direction of things where they might find the help they need.
Which might be those one-off courses
Yeah, although the one-off courses tend to be more like a subject. Let's say a child was interested in horses. We have courses in equestrian studies that students will do, but it's a whole course. It's like a year's study, or approximately a year's study in a subject. It's not so much a one-off course to address a particular need, although there's nothing to stop families doing that. And with our program, they can choose parts of courses to address the need. But when it comes to the secondary school end of our program, if you're wanting a particular course recognised towards qualification, then you actually have to do the entire course. That's probably something that just brings to mind a comparison between our qualification framework and, say, our state school qualifications with NCEA. With NCEA, if a student is working at a particular level, let's say it's level 1 mathematics, the way that our NCEA state school curriculum operates now is teachers will select specific components to get a certain number of credits, but they don't teach the whole course. That's a defining difference between that approach and ours, where when a student's doing the equivalent of a level 1 maths course with us, they have to do the entire course. And we think that equips students with a much deeper and a better overall understanding of their mathematics at that level.
So as we discussed earlier in a pre-chat before the podcast, This is part of a series for families who recognise that the system, the public school system, is failing our children by a huge degree. And one of the solutions for families is to take their children out of school and homeschool. But not everybody wants to put their own curriculum together. Some people want exactly what you're offering, and I'm wanting to absolutely respect and totally concentrate on that particular family's need today. So I'm going to just hone in on those things there to see what you're doing for those families, and also what you're doing where anybody who might be almost like DIY can come, where there is like a one-off course that maybe you can help fill a gap for them or something like that. So I just want to back up the truck a little bit. You were talking about a uni or qualifications pathway that runs parallel, I guess, to our national NCEA. That would be of big interest to parents, because that is a concern. Tell me how that operates. That's probably the best way to start.
Obviously, with homeschooling, some families are doing it right from the beginning when their children are little, but we get a lot of families coming to us midway through their children's schooling. They might be 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years of age, and for some reason, families get interested in homeschooling. The wheels have fallen off for various reasons. We may talk about that a little later in this podcast. But so whenever a family comes to us thinking about their secondary school program for a homeschooling program and how can we homeschool and get our child a qualification, the first thing we do, as I mentioned before, is we get the child to do diagnostic testing so we can see where they're at and are there learning gaps that need to be addressed before they can start working successfully at secondary school level. So when we have the results of those diagnostic tests, in consultation with the parents, we will design a program that will address those learning gaps and get them up and running at secondary level as soon as is realistic for that particular child. Obviously, there's a wide range of academic abilities, and also there's a wide range of destinations. Not everybody is wired to go to university or needs to go to university, so we try and get an understanding of what are the real needs and gifts and interests of that particular child, and what's going to really, what kind of program will best meet those needs. Typically, at say age 12, 13, 14, we would recommend, unless you know what it is you're aiming for beyond your homeschooling program, we would say, well, we'll start working towards a qualification that would give you a level 3 certificate for university. There's criteria that have to be met to get that level 3 certificate. So start working on those subjects of maths and English and science and social studies and getting a broad range of subjects. But as the child ages and starts to become clearer as to whether university is for them or whether something else, it might be polytech or an apprenticeship or just some other kind of vocational training, then those requirements for a level 3 certificate aren't relevant. And what is relevant are the numeracy and literacy credits that they're going to need, because those are just bottom line pretty much that everybody needs to develop. And whatever other subjects and credits and skills are going to contribute. For example, we have students that know they want to be an auto mechanic. So we have an arrangement with a technical training provider that would be at polytech level, and we have students 13, 14, 15 who are working on NZQA unit standards by distance education towards a career in order to getting an apprenticeship as an auto mechanic. They're the academic side of the auto apprenticeship course. They're not the practical hands-on tools components, but within the apprenticeship there are also knowledge-based units that have to be done. So we've got students working. It's just one example of how we can help families get their students prepared for their likely next step.
That will come as a relief to a lot of families because, as I mentioned, that's one of the first questions. Oh, what are you going to do about, university? And I wanted to ask you too, within your Homeschooling New Zealand, what kind of growth have you seen over the last, pre-COVID? Did you notice an uptick in homeschooling then? What did you notice over the last 3 years and what's going on since?
Prior to COVID, we were just seeing steady, quiet growth, I suppose you would say, with people, and I'll talk about the reasons for that in just a moment, the reasons why people come to us. Then when COVID hit, there were two sort of surges, I suppose. Firstly, we had the lockdowns and people were experiencing what it was like to have their children at home. And for the reasons which I will explain in a minute, a lot of people got interested in homeschooling their children and signed up. And then when the COVID mandates, the vaccination mandates came along, there was a massive upsurge of people for specific reasons related to the vaccination requirements that people did not want to be at their children at school. Our numbers of people applying to homeschool with us trebled overnight. And that went on from around about October of 21, I suppose that was, well into about March, April of 22. Every month we were seeing about 3 to 4 times the usual number of people registering. The reality of what's happened, though, since that is that many of those people haven't continued. So whilst there was a sort of a knee-jerk reaction at that point, a lot of those people, for whatever reasons, have not continued on, or at least not continued on with us, but some of them have, and so we're really pleased for that, obviously. Now, and since that has died away, we've gone back to more normal levels, but still at higher levels of interest than we had pre-COVID. So there's a strong trend towards homeschooling. Now that we've identified what we would consider to be 3 main reasons that people would choose to are interested in homeschooling. Firstly is they're concerned about the poor academic standards and the disarray that's in our public school system. But people are not happy with that and they're concerned their children are not getting good quality education. The second reason would be socialisation issues. Now, one of the criticisms about homeschoolers, of course, for those who are familiar with homeschooling, is people are concerned that if you take your children homeschooling, they're going to suffer from socialisation. But in fact, most homeschooling families will tell you the reverse is true. And there's a lot of negative socialisation happening in our schools, whether it's related to bullying or peer group pressure, bad influences. So those are genuine concerns that people have that cause them to think about, I'm not happy with the influences that are happening in my child's life at school, and I want to take back my control and my care of that as a parent. And the third issue that's become more apparent in recent times is the social agenda that is really been ramped up in our schools over recent years, of the social engineering particularly around sexuality and gender issues, but other issues as well. And again, many parents are very uncomfortable with the way our education system has made assumptions that this is how our society needs to be constructed, and families are not happy with that.
So closely aligned with the academic side of the homeschooling needs that families have, there are also just general living family needs that family have. So to what extent does Homeschooling New Zealand help them sort out paths to take, or overcoming obstacles or other matters that might come, just the general struggles that a homeschooling family might have? Do you have any kind of coaching or pastoral care? How would you explain that?
We try and provide support within 24 hours of somebody making a request to us. So within a day, we try and get back to people. So people are contacting us all the time by email or by telephone with their questions. So families that are registered with us, we've designed a program for their child. We've helped them go through the exemption application process. That in the training that the parents have done, they've been shown how we want them to run these different curriculum products, and that training also includes a section on how to apply to the ministry for their exemption application. We've given them guidance on where to buy these different products that they're going to use, but then when it comes to the day-to-day running, that's where the rubber hits the road, isn't it? Because it's Tuesday and we've got our maths and our English and whatever else it is that our children are working on, and some problem crops up, and the parent's not sure how to deal with that, so they would send us an email or phone us up and say, I'm thinking about my child's, they're struggling in this particular area of maths. I'm not sure that this is actually working. It might be too hard or whatever. So we're there on the other end of the phone or by email to discuss that and help them make suggestions or make changes to the program if need be. As the years go by, we're continually updating those plans because obviously children are progressing, and so what's the next step in this subject area? Or now my child knows they want to go to university and study to be an engineer. Which particular courses should we be aiming for, and how do we get there? So we don't generally help parents with, my child doesn't know how to do long division, how do I teach this? The materials themselves are teaching that, and most of the time parents learn it alongside their child so that they can help them through it, or they find someone, maybe an older child, that will help them do that. We don't have the staffing to be helping with the day-to-day nuts and bolts, like when a child puts their hand up in class and says, I'm stuck on question 27. That's not what we're here for. That's really your role as the parent. But behind that next level up of support, we're there for them.
Is there a support network for the parents who just need to talk to one another?
We don't facilitate that. It would be too difficult for us, really. We've got families all over the country, and whilst we know where they are, we leave it to families within their own areas to source local networks. What we do though is every year we travel around the country at different regions at different times. For instance, next week I'll be in the Waikato conducting meetings for our own Homeschool New Zealand families, but also for anybody who's interested in what we do. So those meetings are designed as like refresher courses for our families, to remind them of things they need to be doing and to encourage them in what they're doing, for them to ask questions. Yeah, so that's a way we provide face-to-face contact and support.
I've just thought of a specific example that you might be able to help me with. So one of our sons wanted to be an engineer. Engineering school at Massey had a non-negotiable in that you needed statistics and you needed physics at level 3. Now the rest of his application to Massey we could do via discretionary application, but we thought we had to go down the NCEA road with Te Kura, our correspondence program, to get those two necessaries. So with your arrangement with the Ministry of Ed, or the universities, whichever it is, would there be an alternative if you didn't want NCEA?
We've got the two certificates. The level 3 certificate that the universities just approved and accepted, there obviously are a set number of courses that need to be completed in certain subject areas. You've got to have so many level 3 subjects. But our other certificate, which the majority of our students are actually going to take, because the majority of students are not going to go to university in this country, and so our other certificate, which is called a Certificate of Academic Achievement, is incredibly flexible and enabling you to put in whatever courses you want or need to get you where you want to go. So say, for example, in your situation, you didn't want to have to do our entire level 3 certificate, but you did need to get those physics courses, and so to prove that your child has the necessary knowledge, you could potentially do our Certificate of Academic Achievement and make sure that those courses were included in that certificate. And then obviously you're going to be applying for discretionary entrance rather than just an approved entrance. The only compulsory component of that achievement certificate is one course in Christian studies, and beyond that, whatever else goes in is entirely up to you. Typically, we are going to be recommending to families that numeracy and literacy needs to feature strongly in that certificate, but there's no set number of courses that have to be in it, or any set subject areas aside from that one required Christian studies course. So potentially your boy could have done a Christian studies course and the physics and whatever other courses you mentioned, he might have had to do some prerequisite learning to prove that he was good to go at those levels, so we could be satisfied that he could handle it. But that would be a pathway that you could do with us.
That's a really helpful bit of information for me to have too, because I'm obviously making recommendations, or people are asking me for information on their homeschool paths. So thank you for that. What do you see coming up? Obviously, you have to do planning and strategic thinking for Homeschooling New Zealand. What do you see as up-and-coming needs for homeschoolers that you might be seeing now but aren't quite ready for?
You did forewarn me that you would ask this question, and I probably thought of my answers slightly different to the way that you've pitched that question.
Then please answer as you'd like to. Don't be guided by me.
A couple of issues. One, on a very pragmatic, practical nature, is just the funding that is available to homeschoolers that has never been reviewed or updated since it was first. The Ministry of Education pays an allowance to homeschoolers, and that amount, I did have a minor increase for the first time in something like 30 years. It was a very small increase this last year. We've been making overtures or requests to the Ministry of Education for some years now for them to review that. It's not particularly that we're trying to get large amounts of money out of the government, but rather that there's some adjustment for inflation. So that would be a help to many homeschooling families if the government would review that. Whether that will ever happen, really, most homeschool families would just rather homeschool anyway without arguing over that, but we still think that would be more equitable for families. Accountability is another area that has been raised in the homeschooling area in recent years, and that the people in the education area out there making noises that we have all these children homeschooling and there's no accountability for them. They've been given permission to homeschool their children and nobody knows whether they're doing a good job or a bad job. Now, those of us who are involved in homeschooling know that by and large most parents are doing a very good job, because nobody has their child's interests closer to their heart than their own parents. Whilst we recognise that people who are homeschooling are going to be, for the large part, very responsible about how they go about it, we're actually not opposed to the idea of accountability to the government for what we're doing as homeschoolers. And in New Zealand, by law, we have to get permission to homeschool, but at least we do have that freedom. So it's not unreasonable for there to be some sense of accountability for what are you actually doing. Where we would like to see that go, though, is that rather than government imposing a bureaucratic burden on homeschooling families, we would rather make suggestions to the government as to how they could get a win-win situation, really, where families can make some form of simple accountability to show that they are actually doing something responsible when they're homeschooling their children, and without it being burdensome either for the families or for the Ministry of Education. I think there's about 11,000 children homeschooling in New Zealand at the moment, and a small number, less than 20, I think, were checked up on last year. So the ministry doesn't have the staffing to do checks on people like it does with schools. And we think, or from our point of view, we would be quite happy for some accountability, providing doesn't become, a burdensome bureaucratic nightmare.
Well, there used to be the Education Review Office would, do not random, but you could be selected for a review, which of course you couldn't turn down. And then we only had 2 over 20 years, and we were fine. And I wonder, well, the rumour was they stopped it because it didn't justify the time and expense of doing it, because they found so very few of concerning families. Yeah. So that's
no surprise, is it, really?
Yeah. Okay, well, that's interesting.
And one other thing that I think is a concern or an upcoming issue for homeschool families is, I guess, the protection of our freedom to homeschool according to our beliefs. We're a Christian organisation, but there'll be other homeschoolers listening to this who maybe don't hold to Christian beliefs, but nevertheless have strong beliefs and reasons why they're homeschooling. And what we're seeing trends in our culture where if you're not following whatever the official line of thinking or belief is, that your opinion and views are considered to be not valid or even harmful, even though we don't think so. And so hopefully we don't see this sort of cancel culture impacting on families' freedom to homeschool their children.
Yeah, that is always in the background as a possibility, isn't it?
I'm not wanting to scaremonger about that because we're not experiencing that at this point, but I could see the potential for that somewhere down the track.
Peter, is there anything else?
Well, I was thinking about, for families who might be listening to this and thinking, well, I like the idea of an organisation that provides a structured program. This program, in my observation, works well for many children, but I think families need to know that it's not necessarily going to work for every child. We see fantastic results a lot of the time, and we get a lot of positive feedback from families, but from time to time there are families who will say, well, this isn't working for my child. And so there can be different reasons for that. It may be related to the way the parents running the program is not working, but also there needs to be the open mind that for some children they might need a different approach. So we're not blind to that. We believe in what we're doing. We think it's really effective, but we also have to be mindful of giving freedom for people to look at alternative ways to homeschool. Some families will use a mixture of our program and do some of their own things as well. And that you certainly can do that at primary level very easily. Once you get on board with the secondary school program for a qualification, then you really, if you're wanting the qualification, you've got to follow that more structured program. That may or may not work for your child.
Okay. Anything else you want to mention, Peter?
Well, I talked about the three main reasons people come to Homeschooling New Zealand, or not just Homeschooling New Zealand, but consider for homeschooling. But ideally, the real reason that we are homeschooling our children is because, from our belief basis, children were gifted to parents by God, and it's our responsibility as parents to educate them. Now, we can delegate that task out, but we never delegate that responsibility. And it's a great privilege to be able to homeschool our children, and hopefully that will equip them better for their life now and in the life to come.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. That is a really, really good, encouraging way to finish that up. And if people want to get hold of you, is it homeschoolingNZ?
It's at hsnz.org.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Peter. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Christine.
Okay.